A very warm welcome to this Dell Technologies session at London Tech Week's Global Leaders Innovation Summit with me, Michael Heyman. I'm delighted to be joined by the UK GM at Dell Technologies, Dane Turbett, and the Director of Vodafone Business UK, Anne Sheehan. Now, do let us know your feedback on the conversation using the handle at London Tech Week and the hashtag LTW. And 2020 has certainly been a year where I hope you're going to comment on, because it's been one where business has been put through its paces. And if past mantras have been to move fast and break things, I think today's mission is to move fast and fix things. And we're here today to discuss those that are the real deal, those that have and will use technology to shape a more purpose-driven culture and to provide insight into how that builds resilience and delivers future progress. Dane, and it's great to see you both. Dane, let's start with you. You're this year's progress partner here at London Tech Week. A lot of people are calling this year the Great Reset. Is that how you see it?
Look, I think this year has been an interesting year. Who thought in January when we began the year we would be locked down since March, doing everything remotely on video and with no social interaction whatsoever other than remote. And I think we have a really good opportunity going forward to define what's important. I think it's given us a great perspective on how do we do business, how do we run our lives, what's work-life balance look like, and just how can technology assist in that. I'm very, very interested in the dialogue that if pre-Christmas is technology a force for good or a force for bad? Now we find ourselves 6 months later with technology being an essential part of us being able to run our lives. So that's one area of reset. The other is really what is important to us. If we look at how we've evolved over the last 6 months, who thought we're social beings? We've tried to operate, through a video screen as much as we can, and we're redefining what's important. And I think we need to take lessons out of that as we go forward.
And I saw you nodding at the phrase "business as a force for good." Pick up the story at Vodafone.
I guess, it's just been incredible the last few months. I mean, as a telco and one of the largest providers of connectivity for the UK, we always knew what we did matters. And actually, one of our purpose in Vodafone was hashtag what we do matters. And I think actually a lot of our employees went, wow, what we do really matters, when, we were responsible and are responsible for keeping the citizens connected, be it businesses, small businesses, individuals. So there's been an incredible sense of pride in our employees to say, wow, it's been a really, really tough few months, but an incredible few months where the services that we're delivering are, keeping people alive, keeping people connected. Dane made a very good point about we are all social beings, but actually using our broadband, using technology, using our mobile phones to keep connected has really given our industry, the telco industry, a newfound sense of energy, I think life. So it really has been incredible. I think we've found muscles in our anatomy that we probably haven't flexed before, that we're certainly flexing now. So yeah, I think we feel massively fulfilled and hugely optimistic, actually, in what is probably not the most optimistic of times.
I mean, muscles in the anatomy. What we bench pressing at Dell Technologies, Dane? I mean, a lot of people are saying that, there's a kind of coming of age story here for technology in 2020, that actually the purpose agenda has found a real pathway, I guess, in terms of a really important job to do. Tell us what your year's been about.
Yeah, look, bench pressing is a good example. At one stage, we felt like we had the weight of the NHS on us. Over the last 6 months, I agree with Anne. We've always spoken about our mission is we create technology that furthers human progress. And, never has it been more relevant when we, couldn't diagnose patients because of COVID, or we couldn't get, people into hospitals because of technology. So the first 6 months of this year, we've been rapidly mobilizing what we can to get technology in the hands of people and first-line responders, and that's felt like bench pressing the whole of the UK. But as we continue to flex that muscle and continue to get better. So it's been a great year in terms of responding and understanding what we're in business to do, which ultimately is to deliver some impact. So when you start to talk about a purpose-led company, we actually start to live our purpose. And that purpose really is about how do we progress and make progress further whether that be through diagnostics, whether that be through first line responders, or whether that's through just general innovation on keeping the economy going, leveraging technology. So, it's been a big wake-up call as to what is technology's purpose rather than what is the technology itself.
And I suppose, and in terms of that idea about what is technology's purpose, I mean, we are facing in this pandemic something which is a genuinely global event. I mean, there's very few things that you can say in human experience that affects everyone, it sort of affects the whole planet. You're both working for organizations that have got global and international perspectives. When you look at that purpose debate for you, I mean, is this something where you're seeing the same thing happening everywhere, or do you think that the UK is a slightly different case? I mean, how's it sort of, has experience been for the agenda for you in Vodafone?
Yeah, I mean, no, from a global perspective, in the purpose in Vodafone is to keep, for the UK, it's to keep the UK connected. Initially, to keep, Italy connected. So actually, the purpose and the core values of the company actually have been the same globally. And when we talk about the experiences that the Italians have had, the Spanish, the French, ourselves in the UK, it's the same. People have said the same sense of pride, that unifying together to make sure that we keep people connected. I think that phenomenon has been global. I guess, there was one thing we were a little bit fortunate that we could look to our Italian colleagues who unfortunately experienced COVID probably a month to 6 weeks beforehand. So we were fortunate that we looked in, how did they get like 5,000 contact center workers working remotely? We have a few thousand in the UK. We did it in 48 hours. So there were common problems globally that we could all lean in and fix together. I think what we're focused on now is, what does the future look like? And what's really interesting from a global perspective is, often when you work for the big multinationals, we go to different organizations, we bring them in, Accenture, McKinsey, Bain, and we say, tell us what we should do. And nobody knows the end of the movie now. Nobody knows what the world is going to look like, what the worker of the future looks like. So we've got to all figure this out together. We can't suddenly bring in a consultant who's going to tell us. And that feels strange sometimes for a global organization. I'm sure Dane will comment on that. But it also, out of this crisis will come amazing opportunities. We will never, ever, ever work the same way again. But
I'm sensing our session is made for Twitter. The end of the movie, nobody's seen it. I mean,
love it.
Dane, I mean, when we look at the end of the movie, in terms of the kind of, I guess, from the high heights of a global organization that has got the perspective and got the vantage point of looking at the world. I mean, what's the Dell Technologies view of this in terms of progress moving forward?
Well, look, I agree with Anne. I think nobody knows what the end of the movie is. And I'm sure there's a lot of those consultants that still have points of view and opinions, which we take on board and we listen to. But we are fortunate. We operate in 180 countries globally. We have a large workforce. And to answer your first question, we're seeing similarities everywhere. We're very, very fortunate in that, we've been remote working for the last 15 years. So we kind of know what it takes to work remotely, but even we were quite surprised at how the pandemic impacted us and what we had to adapt. A lot of that was really team members. How do we deal with the team members' mental health? How do we focus on their flexibility and their resilience? And that's been important learnings that we've had from around the globe. And to Anne's point, we had the benefit of observing what went down in Italy first. And I think the Americans are now benefiting from what we learned, because they're still struggling a little bit with COVID themselves in a different way. So, being global gives us the opportunity to kind of follow the sun or follow the pandemic as it's moved around the world and be more ready to react to it in different natures. Bringing it back to the UK, we have a lot of learning that we gain from our global colleagues. And immediately we're mobilizing from what we learned in China, how to manage supply chain, and then how to get the best out of productivity and, let's say, sanity as we continue to go forward, because we've learned lessons in different countries. And I think that's been important for us.
I mean, you're both talking there now as well about what comes next, the future. And I guess, for some people this has been a year to survive.
Yeah.
Others are starting to think about, well, how do we thrive in terms of what might come next? And that speaks to the future of work, and I guess how more purposeful corporations are going to build more resilient outcomes. I mean, a lot of this speaks to a future that I guess is unknowable, but I suppose you might have some early insights into the offices of the future, the workforces of the future. I mean, Anne, how do you see that future shaping up from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think we've got to look at is the purpose of our buildings. So we had a purpose prior to COVID. I don't know, maybe people at digital hubs, at technology hubs. I think the purpose of buildings will completely change. I mean, you know, why would you drive or commute an hour and a half to a building to go in and just do some work on your PC when you can do it at home? So I think what we're looking at in Vodafone is you would go to a building maybe to co-create, to do strategy for social aspects, which are really, really important, which never would have been listed before as the purpose of a building. It's just assumed, well, I will meet people. I think that takes on a whole new level of importance.
That's an interesting point to pick up on, which is that, you know, so many of the things that many bosses have seen as trivial in the past, like the sort of the social interaction of office spaces. I mean, they're becoming new priorities, are they?
Well, absolutely, because whilst it's fine for people to interact via the various different technologies, there is something about being face to face with somebody. There is something about the banter and the camaraderie of a team that's not, you know, that type of connection that you need, particularly when you're trying to build resilient teams in the face of complexity, when you need them to bond. We've got to create an environment for that. And I think that the buildings will continue to have a purpose, but the traditional of everybody should come to the building, the kind of campus environment, I think we need to move on from that. Another point to pick up on what you talked about earlier about the various different, as we look into the future, you know, there's two things I think we need to look at. One, we both the tech sector and the telco sector, we have I guess a responsibility to look after those organizations that are just trying to survive. Small to medium business, it's going to be really, you know, challenging over the next 12 months, and we need to play our role to help them. Then you're going to have, you know, new entrepreneurs, new ideas will be fostered. How do we help accelerate them, get them to hubs, get them the technology that they need? And then I think there's an industry angle, which is health has been just pushed forward, you know, probably in the best way ever. So you'll see more remote surgery, or all that kind of technology is just, it will bring certain industries way forward, and that's really positive. So there's kind of help those that need it, help those that are trying to get started, and then industries and verticals, I think, that just need to be brought years ahead, that have been forced into that situation. So yeah, we have an onus to kind of look after all the different facets, I think, of that.
I mean, I saw, Dane, you nodding your head vigorously when Anne was speaking there about entrepreneurs. And I guess, you know, before we get to the sunnier climes of, you know, those kind of industries of the future, there's a big job to be done in global economies in terms of how businesses are going to be able to pick up and grow. What's the role of tech in that going forward, do you think?
Well, look, I think what's interesting, I mean, Anne and I live on the cutting edge of technology. And when you start to move into the organizations that we work with, technology adoption hasn't been at the level as it will be in the future. There's no doubt about that. If this pandemic has taught us anything, is that, you know, how technology ready, how technology savvy are you as an organization? Whether that's connecting with your teams, connecting with your employees, enabling your call center just to keep the lights on remotely from home, or whether that's actually using technology to keep your business afloat. So if you look at the businesses that have done well, any online retailer, anybody who could deliver remotely, you know, those type of businesses did exceptionally well. Anyone that didn't have a digital strategy and relied on passing foot traffic really struggled. So businesses will now reinvent themselves. Entrepreneurs will come up and step into the gap that are there. And I think it's our responsibility to be in a position to support those people, whether they're startups or whether they're large organizations, figuring out, okay, I've let this go for the last 5 years because it hasn't been a priority, because I never in my scenario planning planned for a pandemic of this nature where everyone was working from home.
I mean, and to that point, Anne, I mean, whether this is a large financial services company that never thought about sending tens of thousands of people back to work from home, or small companies that have taken on probably more digital adoption in the last few months than they have in the last few years. I mean, is that the seedbed for the next chapter? I mean, out of this tragedy of coronavirus, are there things that we should be getting excited about in terms of this more technological age, the fourth industrial revolution, those sorts of things that seem to suddenly look a little bit closer?
Yeah, because I think, it's often been a challenge for, I guess, for Dane and I, just to take as leaders in the industries that we're in, is the adoption of technology. It can be really, I mean, it's there, right? We know some of the use cases with 5G, for example, but actually it's to get the adoption for people to really see there's benefit. And I think what we've seen, if we look back over the last 5 months, where people are forced, probably, which is not a nice word to use, but it's the reality, forced into using the technology, suddenly it opens up a whole new world. And I genuinely think there are key industries like transportation, I think health, I think citizen services, in terms of government citizen services, will never be like they were before. And there will be a demand from citizens to say, I want to interact digitally. I don't want to visit my GP. I'd like to do a Zoom call with my GP. I think there will be a greater demand, right, on our services to say, I don't want to do it like I did before, and I'm not doing it like I did before. And that will drive change for good, in my view.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sorry, Michael, but I agree with that. And if you think about, I always look at about, you asked me 6 months ago if we could have achieved what we've achieved since the lockdown in March, I would have said, yeah, technology's there, but I don't think we could. If I fast forward now back, I'm like, you know what? This gives me back so much time in my life. I'm not commuting hours to go and have a meeting. I'm very comfortable on video now, whereas before it was a conference call. I'm even in your sitting room there, Michael, with your microphone going, and usually that's a face-to-face meeting. And that gives me time back. That was supposed
to be a behind-the-scenes error, Dane, but we've shared it now with the entire London Tech Week community.
That's okay. That's the benefit of technology into your living room there, Michael. There's no more secrets. But the point being is that we're able to get parts of our lives back that we were giving up to move from one area to another. And what we do with those parts of our lives, whether that's with our families, whether that's giving back to the community, whether that's innovating, I think is for the better. And that's really what I think will come out.
But if I could just come in there, because if a cynic listens to this, they'll go, okay, right, get it. You're going to be more family oriented. You can get out more and do things. And, and purpose has got a huge social dimension. The other argument when we look at resilience is that purpose needs to also drive performance. And a lot of cynics will say this is not part of the onward trajectory of successful companies. It's more to do with giving back social benefits. The case, though, for high performance and purpose-driven cultures is one I'd like you to pick up, because I think that's the case that people want to see made. Dane, do you want to start, and then Anne, maybe come on to you?
Well, I'll tee up Anne, but look, if I look back in the last 6 months, we didn't drop productivity at all. We were challenged from a market and economic perspective. We worked with clients that were struggling, but from a individual productivity, it increased, if not stayed the same. The challenge that we will face going forward is how to maintain that productivity in an environment where you're doing most of the stuff in a social, non-social bubble, i.e. excluded. So, putting flexibility around mental health concerns, around support for our employees, and building their resilience in a new way of working will be critical. And in order to do that, I believe you need to build a culture, and a culture comes from a purpose. And if your purpose is shallow, i.e. shifting a product, you're not going to get a lot of people buying in and committing what could be a very big part of their lives to that purpose. Your purpose has to be bigger than that, and it has to be bigger than you. That, I think, drives a great culture, and a great culture drives a resilient team, and a resilient team gives you the results that you need. I'm not sure what
because I think this is what people are really questioning is the degree to which you can actually grow world beaters on purpose cultures. And I mean, pick that up for us.
Yeah, I think, look, I think Dane has said it really eloquently. I think if your purpose is shallow, then I think there isn't longevity. I think it's very, very difficult. I think if you really have your teams brought into, I mean, as I said, our purpose is keeping the UK connected, and there's something just incredibly meaningful for the teams about that. But you've got to, a culture is hard work, right? So we've got to work really, really hard. Like in Vodafone, we're communicating a lot. We're taking a huge amount of feedback from our employees about how they're finding it working from home. Productivity, actually, at the moment is not our issue. The issue is more the social isolation. Yeah, and the concern is, you go into the winter months now, it's dark in the morning, it's dark in the evening, and that's what we have to work on. I think on the
is that a stamina issue, do you think?
I think it's more, months and months and months of, if you're not, depending on the role you do, but if you're not on a lot of, we'll say, Zoom calls back to back, right, and you're doing operational work, well, then you're not going for lunch with somebody that you would often meet in the canteen. We've got to figure that out, because the social aspect and our employees' health and well-being is massively important, right? It was important before COVID. It's even more important now. So the productivity, there's plenty of tools in the marketplace that we can put to see whether people are productive or not. As I said, if they're engaged and they're motivated, I think that will take care of itself.
Right.
The bigger part is people's well-being, that social isolation, and how we figure out that hybrid worker of the future. I think permanently working from home, we discussed this before, there is an IBM case study where they put a sizable portion of their employees up about 10 years ago working from home, and they reversed that, right? So there are challenges when you've permanent home workers. But we'll have to, that's why I think it's going to take hard work. I think panel discussions like this are super important. I go back to the point is, we don't know the end of the movie. If we knew that like this had happened 10, 12 years ago or 20 years ago, and this is the hybrid worker. So we're going to have to work really hard, and we're going to have to test and learn like everything else, and kind of figure it out,
it sounds like the end of that movie has got a slightly more balanced outcome, Dane, in terms of like the relationship between more mobility, but also I guess a reimagining of our workspaces. I mean, the thing I would ask is that you can see the direct line where technology plays its impact on higher performance, those kind of those performance outcomes. Back onto Anne's point about well-being and humanity, the idea of actually technology's role in helping us become more human, I guess, or fulfilling our human potential. How do you see that?
Look, I think technology is great. And if I may divert the question a little bit, Michael, it comes back to leadership. I think what will change in going forward is how you lead and what becomes important. As you look, it's quite actually easy to lead an organization that turns up the same place every day, is face to face. You get to talk to them, you get to watch their body reactions. It's a completely different thing to lead in the current environment and what's going to come. So there are going to be Harvard Business Review case studies written around leadership in the post-COVID era. I can imagine that. And technology will play a part in that. Technology will play a part in enabling the organization to stay connected to the UK, the organization to reinvent their business. However, it's really how we adopt that technology and what it's used for. What is that purpose of that technology that I think is going to inspire organizations and inspire teams to allow them to build the resilience to cope with what's coming. That's what I would say.
Now, we're fast running out of time. I'm just going to invite you just to give a quick sort of 20-second tweet-like end. And I'm going to start with you. I mean, I think you've given more kind of Twitter value for this session than we could have possibly hoped for. Quick final thought for you in a tweet-like fashion.
I think we've got to work hard over the next few months to figure out what the future looks like. I think the technology is there. I think it does come down to our leadership style, the purpose we have as a company, how we translate that purpose for our employees. And I think as leaders, we're going to have to, we have to walk the walk.
Walk the walk. Dane, your final thoughts.
Yeah, to steal Anne's line, we don't know the end of the movie, but I can tell you what, we'll be there smiling at the end. So looking forward to the journey. looking forward to working with our organizations and our partners and our ecosystems through the challenge and focusing on the rebuild. And as you said, this reset gives us an opportunity to figure out what is our purpose, what is important to us, and how do we get ourselves there, and make sure it's a good ending.
Dane, and thank you very much. That's been our London Tech Week Global Leaders Innovation Summit session from Dell Technologies with me, Michael Heyman. Thanks for joining us, and we now send you on to the next session.